Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar. My name is Lori London. I'm a marketing manager at Hyperproof and I'll be getting us started today. Today our topic is how to choose and qualify for the right cyber insurance policy. A bit of housekeeping points before we get started. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, we welcome you to enter them into the Q&A box for our presenters to answer after they've finished their content. If you have any other problems with audio or visual during the event, please try leaving the presentation and re-entering. If this doesn't work, please let us know you're having trouble in the Q&A box and we'll try to assist you as best we can. The event is being recorded and it will be available on demand on our Bright Talk channel following the end of the event. And attendees and registrants will receive an email with a link to the on-demand event as well. Now, JC, our head of product marketing, will take the floor and introduce you to our guest speaker, Chris Ballard of the Ballard Agency.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. I am JC Joe, and I'm the head of product marketing with Hyperproof. Excited that you chose to spend time with us today. I am really glad to have Chris Ballard here from the Ballard Agency, who is been in the cyber insurance industry and the insurance industry in general for quite a while. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you. My name is Chris Ballard. I'm the president and the principal of the Ballard Agency. We're located in Kirkland, Washington, just outside Seattle. I've been in the insurance industry for 24 years now. And growing up in Kirkland, Seattle area, in the shadow of, the startups with Microsoft and Amazon, I got exposed to technology really early in my career. And so I've always been fascinated with technology. And so as companies and insurance portfolios have evolved over time, I just dove in and learned as much as I could about technology, errors and omissions, and cyber insurance. And I'm excited to see if I can help some folks today.
Thank you. So just in case you're not familiar with us at Hyperproof, we are a compliance and risk compliant. We are a compliance operations software company. We're founded in the greater Seattle area. So in a nutshell, the software helps compliance professionals and companies organize and automate their compliance and risk management workflows. It really serves as a single source of truth for your company's security and compliance documentation, makes it much easier to collect evidence of your controls and retrieve and access relevant information. If you need to be able to fill out a cyber insurance application, or if you need to prepare for an audit, or if you need to fill out security questionnaires from your customers. So just to kind of set the stage for our discussion today and why we're talking about this, I'm going to share a story with you. So, Hyperproof, we are a compliance software company. So we've always known that it's important to be very robust and secure in how we handle our customers' sensitive information. We did invest in security pretty early in our company's journey. But then, we've had cyber insurance policy actually as soon as we started selling the software in the market back in early 2020. And then last year, so 2021, we were trying to work with a very large Fortune 500 company. We had done a ton of work to try to get this customer. They really liked our product. We had done, the technical evaluation. They had done security assessment, risk assessment. And then, so we thought we were really close to being able to win this deal. But then a surprise actually hit us. Their legal team came back and said, hey, we are not able to work with you because your cyber insurance policy coverage is too low. It needs to be at 10 million instead. And so this was a surprise that this was a blocker. We were able to turn around and quickly up our cyber insurance policy, and we were able to work with this customer, fortunately. But, had we not been prepared, had we not already had a security program in place and everything documented, we may have not been able to get this higher coverage, and we would have lost this deal that that a lot of people had put a lot of time towards. So I tell you this story because, and Chris actually was there for it too. He works with us. He's our broker. Is that you really want to have the right policy and have it before you need it. You really don't want to be caught flat-footed in a situation where a deal is on the line or a breach has already happened, only to find out that you didn't have the adequate policy. So with that, I wanted to, we thought but the way that you can qualify for cyber insurance policy is a lot harder now. Choosing the right one has become more complicated in the past couple of years. There's been a lot of changes. That's why I wanted to have Chris here to bring some clarity to these questions that a lot of people have right now. So with that, Chris, do you want to tell us what do you think are some key changes in the cyber insurance market that people should be aware of?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, to echo what you said, is the difference in the last 2 to 3 years in what it took to get cyber insurance and what's included has changed drastically. The underwriting guidelines and what insurers are requiring in order to qualify for coverage is much higher. The bar is much higher. And as you'll see on the slide there, is that if you do not have multi-factor authentication as part of your security, basically you've disqualified yourself, but effectively all of the, what I would call the reasonable insurance marketplaces. You might be able to find something that won't take it, but it's not going to be good. The second piece here is that, like, if you had insurance last year, there's no guarantee you're getting it back. The renewal cycle is far more complex. They're going to ask a lot more questions. And again, having your ducks in a row so that you can either qualify for your first purchase or renew your coverage, or, for example, like in HyperProof's example, need more because either you have a pending contract or you've done your assessment and realized that you are grossly underinsured. You need to have all those pieces in a row before you apply or in the application process. Another thing to know is that, insurance coverage, this cyber insurance and technology E&O is significantly more expensive than it was last year and the year before. We're seeing premium increases. I would say a client is lucky if it comes in at 20% up. We've seen 50 and in some cases 100 to 200% increases in their premiums, regardless of risk factor and regardless of growth. So if you have a fast growing company, you're going to have the double whammy of the increased risk and the increased exposures. The biggest piece that I'll touch on this too is that this is very much a seller's marketplace. Comparable to, if you've heard that phrase in real estate, is the days are gone where you filled out a basic application and threw yourself out in front of 5 or 10 underwriters and they would, quote, compete for your business. It is, I would say it's completely reversed the other way, is that you get yourself all geared up, ready to go, all your documents in a row, and then you prepare to sell your company to an underwriter and get the prettiest picture that you can for an underwriter so that they're more comfortable, because it's far easier for them to say no than yes. And I think the biggest thing I can stress there is underwriters would rather say no than yes, because they don't get anything if they write the business, but they certainly get their hands slapped if they write a piece of business and it has a loss, which translates to it's a longer process. It can take for higher limits, it can take weeks to put these things together, if not longer. So those are the biggest pieces. I think it's more that shift of mentality to, we'll just go get some quotes, to we have to have everything ready so that we can apply for this and be ready to present ourselves well. So these pictures are kind of funny. Is the landscape this was explained to me, and it hit all the pieces of like memory triggers. And for me, is you had this vision of like what a hacker was, and you see here it's a kid in a basement who's angry at the world and wants to get back at a company, or maybe it's a sophisticated thief who's going after one particular target, and I'll equate it to like the specialized art thief who's going after XYZ. And the reality is now is, I don't know what that picture is, but these are teams of highly trained people who are literally, it's like software as a service, only they're hired by organized crime and governments, and some of them are government funded. The threat actors that are out there are far more organized, and while there are specific targeted attacks, there's also just what we refer to as the flood. And this is where your perception of being a target needs to change. Is you look at the environment like a dam, and there's all this water behind the dam. The water doesn't care where the crack is. It's just going to find the crack and exploit it. It doesn't care if Walmart's behind the crack, or a mom and pop grocery store is behind the crack, or Microsoft's behind the crack, or a local coffee cart's behind the crack. They're looking for it, and they're looking for any way in there so that they can grab data, encrypt, or email penetrate, take over, and manipulate email systems for fraud. So it's a much different environment to say like, oh, people don't go after manufacturing, or people don't go after distributors. They go after technology companies. Or I don't process credit cards. I'm not a target for theft. It's a shift. The mentality is everybody's a target for theft if you're using technology.
And this is actually reflected in the data, right?
Yes, it is. You'll see here is that the average ransom demand for if a company's data is encrypted has continued to tick up. It's now currently 1.8 is the demand. Now I'm not saying that that's what everybody pays. I'm not saying that's what insurance companies are always paying out, but that is the average demand to get your data back if you've had it encrypted. And you'll see in that next column over is the survey. I read this survey and I almost didn't believe it. And I'm in the business, is that out of 5,600 companies that were surveyed in January, 66% of them had been hit by some kind of ransomware. And out of those percentage, 65 of those were successful in encrypting some data. And you can see below is that, which is no surprise, 90% of them were impacted by their inability to operate. And 86% of those realized some sort of loss of business or loss of revenue. And the average cost to remediate one of those attacks, 1.4 million. And the average time is 1 month. And I like to bring it down to stuff that these big numbers are great, but like we've all been in the situation too, where if you're a little older school like me and still have a printer, when you go to print and all of a sudden you're out of toner, you know how annoying that is. So imagine you go to pull up your accounts payable and all you get is a screen that says, pay us. Like, do you think printer cartridges or printer toners running out is annoying? Imagine somebody else having all your data for a month.
And because of just the increase in these successful cyber attacks and claims going up, right, it means that the insurers are reacting and they are factoring this into the pricing of their products, right? Do you want to talk? I would love to hear more from you on how are insurers actually gauging risk and pricing it into their underwriting process.
Sure. So this is a stat that was brought out by one of the insurance wholesalers that we work with, CRC, and this is a graph. It's a little muddied, but you get the idea. Is there's a lot of red on there, and it's not pretty. There was a lot of folks insurance companies that is, who kind of ran in and grabbed a bunch of the marketplace, thinking this was going to be a great way to make some money, and they got beat up hard to the point where some of them have even left the marketplace. But what we're seeing is, like I mentioned before, is the average price increase is 28%. Is you can see it here. Now, this is reflective of wholesale business, which tends to be some of the riskier industries. Maybe they don't have all their ducks in a row, or they're in, and I'll go through kind of what riskier plays are. But insurance companies are just asking so much more data, and like, even the ones that are doing well are taking 20 to 25% rate increases because of the work that it takes to pay off these claims. Even if they negotiate the ransom down, which a lot of them are able to do, they hire contractors to do the negotiations, and they hire, the specialists, or they work with your team to do it. There's still those associated costs with it, right? And so insurance companies are like any other business. They look at what their costs are, they look at what they spend, and they're going to have to price accordingly for that. So they're going to do two things. They're going to raise their prices, and they're going to, anybody that they perceive could cost them or more money than average, or has a greater possibility of loss, they're just going to say no to, because they'd rather say no than charge somebody 28% and lose $1 million, if that makes sense.
Yeah, do you want to give us some more kind of specific categories or frameworks for how the underwriters look at the risk profile of a company?
Yeah. One of the things here is, so this is kind of like what underwriters perceive as risky. Difficult classes are healthcare. I think that's probably pretty obvious. Real estate, collection agencies, as you can imagine, they have a massive amount of PII in their things. Title companies, escrow companies, municipalities have always been and will continue to be targets, not only just because they may not have the budgets for infrastructure, but the historic lack of controls. And just they're also a preferred target. These people just don't like municipalities. And so threat actors, you're getting both the attack by the dam and the targeted. Schools almost never seem to have enough budget for the right technology, the right security. They always seem to be I mean, I know that I live in a pretty great school district, but their tech still seems, horribly far behind. And they've got all that kid, PII. So you've got minors involved too, which just escalates that threat level. Managed service providers. You would think that obviously at an MSP, like, they're going to have great security, right? Because they're handling it. They're handling other people's security systems. It's not that they don't have great security. It's that this is like the really choice target, right? This is the 50 for one. In that, like, if a threat actor is able to get into an MSP, they've got access to all the kind of downstream, all their clients' information at once. So they're highly targeted because of the sheer volume of stuff that they could get to. If you could break into one museum and steal 20 museums worth of art, you're going to go after it. So I would say MSPs are probably on 80% of my insurance companies' absolute, we won't even think about them list. So they're very difficult. Utilities, just, not only because of the critical infrastructure that could cause, obviously the pipeline last year was a massive one, because they'll pay fast because they have to. If you're threatening to shut down a pipeline, you're threatening to shut down electricity, you may not want to pay, but you may pay just so that you can keep the power on. Law firms, not only because of the incredible amount of sensitive data that they have, but the sheer billing hours that they would lose if their data is encrypted, as they tend to pay the ransoms faster. Technology companies are always just targeted. This is interesting one is game developers are highly targeted, but I haven't yet to have someone tell me why. That makes sense. I just know that they just don't like them. and it's interesting. I don't have a good reason for it, but they're on my list of like, these are highly problem accounts. I write a lot of them being in Kirkland. Like I have several video game clients and we work around it, but it doesn't mean that everybody likes them. And anyone who has a high number of PII or personal health records, right? Like if you're processing a massive amount of credit cards, you're going to be higher risk. If you have a ton of personally identifiable information, you're going to be at a lot of risk because the more records a threat actor gets, the more that's worth. The more, data you can encrypt, the less your business goes down, the faster you're going to pay a ransom. So those are kind of the current hot, we don't like them lists. The other one that everybody hates this answer, but it's the reality, is the more unique your company, the more difficult it is to underwrite. Which is to say that, if you're the true disruptor of the industry, you're the next leading edge of everything. That's like your competitive strength in the marketplace. It's working so much against you in the insurance world because the insurance world loves large number data. And if you're brand new and you're in a new space, they don't have anything to compare it to. So it's easier for them to say no. Fintech falls in here. They don't know how to handle it. It's new. When things are new, underwriters say no. Everybody else loves it. They think it's great. Underwriters hate it. And then the higher limits you want, the more they're going to scrutinize you. And this makes total sense. Just think about if you're going to go out and borrow $10 million, they're going to want more information than if you're applying for a $2,000 line of credit at a local bank, right? So the bigger the numbers are, the more hoops you have to jump through, I guess. You have to have your ducks in a row. You have to be able to, your documented plans, your copies of your audits. There are some times where they will interview security folks on large things. So just be ready that if you need $10 million worth of coverage or 20 million or whatever it is that you need, then just be ready to know that the application process is going to take longer and they're going to want to see a lot more. This is not going to be a Geico 15 minutes is going to save you 15% exercise. It's going to be complete. It's going to be a 6-week process and be prepared to feel like you went through an IRS audit. Best in class clients on the other side of it are the ones that have everything in a row, are in the lower, if you happen to be in a lower threat class, that's great. But still, if you imagine it like this, if you're an underwriter and you've got 50 applications on your desk, so to speak, and one is sitting there and it's half filled out and, there's, TBD and there's a bunch of, unknowns, or there's one that is everything is fully completed, fully signed, and, here's a copy of the audit, and, here's our procedures, and here's a copy of our training regimen, and here's how we track our people going through it. As an underwriter, you're going to look at the one that's pretty, right? You're going to look at the one that's all taken care of. So that's what best in class things. And so you're going to get better limits. You're going to get more underwriting consideration. And when you have to ask for exceptions or increases to specific limits, like funds transfer, which is frequently sublimited, you're going to have a better chance of getting those exceptions. And they just really, underwriters also want to know that if you do get hit with an event, that you're going to be able to survive it. The insurance company doesn't want to be your savior. They want to be your funding mechanism. They want to pay your loss, but they want to know that, hey, you've got the backups that you need. They want to pay the loss, but they don't want to, I guess, for lack of a better word, have you, they don't want to be your babysitters. They want to know that that you've got skin in the game, that you'll win through this process.
So I guess that's really interesting. So there's a lot. Could be a lengthy process and a difficult one, depending on kind of what risk class you're in, right? But so if you are a company and you suspect that you may not get coverage, or it may be difficult for you to get coverage given your current state, what could you do to actually get yourself coverage, and what could you do to become qualified and put yourself in a better position?
Yeah, I think step one is just stop and take a good hard look at your own organization. Like, how are we treating security? Is security is it something that we accommodate, or is it something that we prioritize? Have we allocated resources to it? Do we have an actual plan, or is it, ad hoc? Do we look at it as a barrier to speed, or do we look at it as the way that we make sure that we're continuing to move forward as an organization to best serve everyone? That it's that mentality of, okay, like, where are we? And just be realistic. And then once you've had that realistic, is that, communicate with your broker, somebody like me, is like, hey, here's what we have and here's what we want. What do we need? And I know in certain situations that I've had, I've got a company that, like, they come to me and here's what we need, here's what we want. Okay, frequently we'll use an application, and a couple of our underwriters who use technology and penetration testing as underwriting models is go, okay, we kind of put this thing together, we float it past a couple underwriters, and we'll get some feedback, and like, hey, okay, here's what if they want this, here's what they're going to need. And then you develop that plan to fix it. And then we implement that plan, communicate back with those people, fill out the application, and move forward. So it really starts with the have we made a good, hard, honest assessment of where we are.
That makes sense. Let's move on to our next topic, which is, there is first getting through and being able to qualify, right? But then the next thing is, it's actually not that easy to choose the right policy. And because there's a lot of reasons, but the insurers really want to make sure that you're going to be a good client and they minimize their losses. So, Chris, what is considered an adequate policy? How do you determine that for your own business?
Sure. So the fundamental basic question is, do you have enough coverage for what we refer to as your maximum probable loss? So a couple of things to think about is, the easy one is, do you have a contract that is requiring a certain amount? Well, that's really easy. You don't have to think much about that. But then take that out of the equation is, okay, if we were shut down for 3 weeks, how much money would we need? Or, how much money do we have that people could get access to? Like, where are we? Like, how much money would I want if somebody encrypted all of our data to pay a ransom? How much is so you're starting to look at, if all of our personal health records were breached at, 87 cents, $1.27 a record, how much do I need to pay for all their credit monitoring and their, 3 years of LifeLock or whatever it is that your state requires that you do? There's the notification laws in your state, multi-states. You may have to manage that process in 50 states. So figuring out that number, whatever that number is. And, I'll say that, it used to be that, like, everybody started at $1 million. Well, most people are starting at 3 to 5, because that's what's realistic now. So you figure out what that number is of what you want. And then you start looking at, once you've applied, as the proposals come back from underwriters, I think it's important to understand that there is absolutely no standardization amongst these policies. So you have to compare them very carefully. And a couple of things that, I think people should know about is the next one on the screen there is an indemnification policy versus pay on behalf. So indemnification is a very fancy insurance word for we'll pay you back, which is, so you've had a loss and you had to pay a ransom of, say it was only 7,500 grand or whatever. It's a small one, right? And you paid it. You have to pay it, and then you get reimbursed. So that's never a pretty picture because you're relying on someone else to fund it. and you're out that money, whatever that number is, for a specific period of time until the insurance company is gracious enough to cut you a check. So you can imagine, just in all the different costs that go along with that, is a lot of places you're required by law to do the forensic audit. Well, those are expensive, and if you have to front that, then and you're getting reimbursed, you can imagine what that does to cash flow versus a true pay on behalf policy, which is they're gonna they'll work with you, they're gonna pay the vendors, you're only responsible for your deductible. That's a big flag. The total policy limit is, you could have a per incident policy, and then there's a typical aggregate limit of insurance. So you could buy a $5 million policy and it's got all these coverages in it. It all looks really good, except where at the bottom it says, okay, but it's 5 million, but that's in for everything. And so you could blow through all of it on notification costs and not have anything left for business interruption. So it's knowing what those limits are that are within the policy and where the policy actually caps out at. Is ransomware even included? I've seen policies out there where it's just flat out like excluded, or social engineering, nope. Or most times though, it's not excluded, but it's what we call a sublimit. Whereas you have a $5 million policy, but you're only getting, 500,000 or whatever that is. And that may make sense because maybe you can only, maybe you don't have a $5 million exposure to ransomware. But it's important to know that in this renewal cycle I have seen those limits continue to drop. So you need to keep an eye on it, because if you need $500,000 or you need $1 million, you got to ask for it. It's not necessarily going to be just included. The next piece is on the screen there is the warranties that can void a policy. Like, there's two different kinds. You're filling out an application and you're swearing when you sign it that it's true, but also there may be a warranty in there that you're agreeing to certain things that you will do throughout the year. And if you don't do those and there's a loss and you have that warranty in there, the very first thing they're going to do is look at that warranty and figure out if, before they start investigating, is figuring out if you were doing what you were supposed to do. And if you weren't, they're not on the hook for anything. So if you don't have to get a policy that doesn't have that, I highly recommend it, because it's going to cost you a lot when you need it. And then, does the policy limit who you work with at the time of loss? I was working with a potential client a month or so ago. I was reviewing their existing program. It was very price competitive. Like, it was cheap. And just like anything else, when something's cheap, there might be a problem. And I looked at it, and they were not going to be able to use their own MSP to do the work if they had a breach, which means that the people who know their systems the best can't do the work. And if they hired the MSP to do the work, the insurance company wasn't going to pay them. So, that is one of those costs that is much more costly than, say, a premium, for example. And then this last comment on the screen is, what training or documentation does your coverage require? It goes back to that warranty. Do you have the pieces in place that you need to prove that you're doing what it is that you say you're doing? If you said we track this in the application process and you're not tracking that, that's going to be a real problem come claim time.
That's a really good point. So it sounds like it's really important to understand all these details, right? But also to be very careful when you're filling out an application to make sure that you understand what they're asking for.
Yes, very much so. If you don't understand a question on the application, because just like the policies aren't standardized, neither are the applications. And so if you don't understand what the question is, work with your broker to get a real understanding of what that question is asking, and don't guess, because you don't want to tell the insurance company one thing and not be doing it. Be accurate. Get your tech teams involved. It used to be 3, 4 years, 5 years ago is the CFO and we would go through the applications and be like, yeah, we've got that. Yeah, we've got that. And it was far more casual. It's not casual anymore. A lot of my clients are actively getting their tech teams involved, or, maybe they're MSPs, so that they know what it is that they truly have. Because it also can be very eye-opening is maybe the C-levels don't really know what it is that they have. They think they have one thing, they go to fill it out and they realize they don't have it. It can be a great way to go to kind of like, okay, here's part of the self-assessment. We thought we had this and we don't. Know what security measures your cloud providers have. Obviously, I know to this day, everybody's like, oh, we don't have to worry too much about security. We're in the cloud. Well, that's awesome. And some of the best security in the world is provided by cloud providers, but you need to know what it is that they are doing and what your contracts say with them so that you can effectively translate that to an insurance company. Because, not all clouds are built equal, and you need to still be able to fill out an application correctly. And I have seen application sets where the underwriters have come back and said, we want to see a contract of the copy or a copy of the contract you have with your provider. It's to see how the indemnification wording works between the two, if there is any, who's in favor of that. And the last one is, and like I put it on here kind of almost as a joke, but it's not. Don't lie. Just don't. Just like, because I equate this to, it sounds so simple, but there's this perception out there is that like, oh, we'll just put this on there and, oh, it won't be a big deal. Well, it will be a big deal. And I'll tell you, there's a large insurance company, well-known, who will remain nameless, who is in a court battle right now with a client. They issued a policy to their client. They, in the application, certified that they had multi-factor authentication. They did not. And they are going back to court to have the policy voided from inception, which and they're not denying the claim. They're going even further and saying, we're voiding this contract and here's why. And if they lied, most likely they will do that, which means the only insurance company's responsibility is they're going to hand them their premium back. And, this company, needless to say, the only reason this came up is because they're in the middle of a breach claim. I will concede, if you lie and you never have a loss, there's nothing will ever happen to you. But it's also like going up skydiving and not packing your chute right. Like, that's not the time to, when you jump out of the airplane, to pull the cord and wonder if the chute's packed correctly. It's just, that's not, you'd be shocked. And I jokingly put it on there, but it happens more often than you think.
Yeah, that's a really good example, but I think it really goes to show that ultimately, you need to have cyber insurance, but as an organization, right, the key, it's really important to be responsible in putting those safety features in place. Beyond just having cyber insurance, it's really important to continuously monitor the effectiveness of your security program. So I guess, and what are your thoughts on like what do companies need to do on their own beyond having cyber insurance to improve the likelihood that they can survive and recover if something happens?
Well, it kind of gets back to that, like, how do you treat security? Is it an afterthought, or is it security? Don't get me wrong. I'm a born sales guy. So for me, things that take extra steps, quote, slow me down. So, but are you looking at security as something that slows you down? Versus it's what we need to make sure that our company is stable for our clients. And are we providing the necessary things that allow our customers, our vendors to trust us? And so it's, have we dedicated the resources to it? Are we aligned with, the right framework? Do we have a plan in place? Are we monitoring it? our, the set it and forget it only worked in that one infomercial one time for the little oven that cooked the chicken. Like everything else, like you don't get to do that with security, just like everything else. Invest in security training and awareness, because one of the top losses is spear phishing, right? So you can have the best security in the world. People will make mistakes. The people who write these emails that trick people into giving away information, giving away access, are much better than we have. We all remember 3 years ago when you could spot a phishing email about 100 miles away because it was written so poorly and the graphics were so bad. They're so much better now that at the pace at which people are digesting email and digesting messages, it's easier and easier to slip. So training people to how to spot those, does this make sense? Why would this be coming now? Like this, why are they in such a hurry? It's a great question. Why are these people in such a hurry for this? Like, thieves, good thieves are patient. Bad thieves are always in a hurry. And just making sure that your people have that necessary ongoing training. And if you're a larger organization, you're testing that. You're actually running phishing tests on your own people, and you're seeing if they will bite on the hook. It's better for them to bite on it in a test than it is to bite on it from an outside party. And then protocols on, I didn't actually make the slide, is, making sure that your protocols on how you control your cache, your internal controls, how you're making sure, like vendor authorizations, how money leaves your organization, because the funds transfer fraud I have seen some incredibly creative ways that people, very smart people, have been duped out of a lot of money. And if I don't know how I'm doing on time, if we have time at the end, remind me, I'll tell you the story of the really unique one that hit a client of mine that was like, I wouldn't have seen it coming that way about a year and a half ago. Back up your data, have it online, have it separated. Obviously, if you're in the cloud, they're taking a lot of that responsibility, but test it. Just like you should be going around your house twice a year and checking your smoke detectors and making sure that your fire extinguisher isn't from 1978. Make sure that you could actually run off of your backup data, that it's not, it turns out it hasn't been backing up for 4 weeks. It hasn't been backing up for a year, and then overall, that just moves into an overall disaster recovery plan. Okay, what would we do if, I had something similar happen to me the other day as I showed up at the office and there was no power. I'm like, okay, what do we do? And so, okay, well, this is the step, and we're back up and running. But if you don't plan ahead of that, then the chaos that ensues within your organization, like employees get scared, they freak out, they don't know what to do. Having a plan and testing it is key.
I would say having good documentation of all the different security activities you are invested in on an ongoing basis is also key for being able to be accurate when you're applying for cyber insurance.
Absolutely. Like that kind of comes down into the disaster plan piece, right? Like, okay, so we know here's where everybody is. So, we have it all documented. It's clear.
So we're pretty much towards the end. There's been a lot of really informative insights you've shared, but I'm really wondering, given how things are today, what direction do you think the insurance industry is going? Do you have any predictions for the future?
I do. I think there's going to be continued increased scrutiny, using more technical questions, which is where, like I mentioned before, bringing your technology team in, and more requirements on actually having certifications, and an increase of the use of technology in underwriting. One of our insurance carrier partners has a absolutely beautiful technology system that they use, where they're using penetration testing and some electronic screening. It's really helpful in utilizing, because it exposes some things that for clients that allow us to kind of tweak some things. I suspect that more and more companies are going to be using that, because they're going to see how the loss trends operate. Because there's a certain, we go back to the what's risky, what's not risky list of industries, some of that's a little bit of a fallacy, because you could have a utility that's got an absolutely rock solid, beyond impenetrable IT system, and you could have one of the low risk categories like Joey's Bakery that's like has no passwords. So you're going to see some more technology introduced. I'm going to see an increase in warranty wording. I hate it. I don't like it. I don't like warranties in policies, but we don't have choice. Like this is where I see it going, is more and more requirements of you have skin in the game. You need to do these things, and you need to be able to prove that you are doing these things. That, so that at the time of loss, that you can show that you were doing the adequate security training. You were keeping tabs on things. And even more move to a seller's market, which is, you have to put your best foot forward when you are applying for insurance, and having the right mentality of working with a broker, working with the underwriters to make sure that you are presenting the best picture possible. The best picture possible is not waiting to the last minute, not waiting until you need it, and running in and not having everything. Because there's two things: is underwriters see that and they realize, okay, if you're running around last minute on this, where else are you running around last minute? These are people too. And the other reality is with people like me, if you're running around last minute and not getting things done and everything's ad hoc, like I may not have time to work with you either. So it's a two layer of, it's just like everything else. If you want to work with experts and you want to get the best possible stuff, have your stuff ready. So I see more and more of that. You're always going to have a certain segment out there that is, you're going to be able to apply online. You're going to be able to get a quick quote. You're going to be able to get all this and that. And I've tested those kind of as a mock consumer. The amount of, they do, it looks good, but the problem is you don't get to read the policy. And I have then subsequent read those policies, and the term we use in the industry is Swiss cheese. Like, it's technically a policy. And yes, if you needed to fog a mirror and show somebody you had proof of insurance, you could use it. It is a document that says you have insurance, but I wouldn't want to jump out of an airplane with it. So there's always going to be that segment of insurers coming in trying to grab that market share. I equate it a lot to the people who go out and write, they specialize in writing insurance for high risk young drivers with 3 DUIs. Like, it's always going to be there. But it's not going to be pretty. So, the quality work is always going to be done for the people who are ready.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you, Chris. This concludes our prepare questions section. So now we're going to move into Q&A from the audience. So we have a question about what are your thoughts on insurers carving out ransomware coverage in the future, or policies moving to an a la carte style?
I see more and more insurers definitely looking to carve out ransomware, or at minimum minimize their exposure to it, meaning you've got a $3 million policy, but you've got $50,000 for ransomware. Or you have $250,000 of ransomware, but it's an indemnification clause, meaning, yeah, we'll repay you, but you got to pay it first, which for a small organization is effectively an exclusion, because if you don't have $250,000, you're not getting your stuff back anyways. So we call that exclusion by sublimit, is kind of an industry joke. It's like, yeah, well, you're not really providing coverage. I think there's always going to be a market for ransomware. I think the definitions within the policy may get tighter, and it may, as we go forward, may require even more study on what ransomware is and isn't defined in a policy, where we could get some things where you get 2-3 policies side by side. They all say they have some ransomware coverage, but company C has ransomware, but it carves out this, that, and the other thing as not covered, excluded in there, which is one of those devils in the details of the deep in the contracts, which is why, when you get into that level, get with your broker and go through that particular piece so that they know, which of those pieces I don't want you to buy a gaping hole, I guess.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So are there any strategies to actually lower your premium? This one person said their firm is looking at creating a captive or increasing retention costs to lower the premium. Any other strategies you see clients taking part in?
So those two suggestions are both valid, but extraordinarily different ends of the spectrum. Increasing retention is, for those on the call that don't know, it's effectively like, quote, raising your deductible on your car insurance, right? Like, you're taking on more of the risk so that the premiums are lower. And that is a very effective way to do it. Depends on the size and scale of your operation and how much credit you're getting for taking on that level. Forming your own captive is something that is, obviously, and for those of you who don't know, it's you're tired of paying insurance premiums and you're going to form your own insurance company. There's a lot of legal work to do. I know a guy, one of my good friends does it, forms captives for companies. There's some stuff around captives that, they're a lot of work. There's a lot of costs in starting a captive. There's a lot of costs in running a captive. There's also the reality of, will it pass all the tests, that a captive requires? There's certain reasons you can use a captive and there's certain reasons that you can't. I'm not an expert in captives. I would refer you to someone that does. It is something that higher risk companies could look at as a solution, but these are, obviously you're in the realms of, spending $5 to $10 million a year on insurance. Captives start to make sense. Less than that, your administration costs don't make any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next question. I have been advised that carriers don't want MSPs to mitigate a breach because if the breach was caused by neglect or omission of MSP, the MSP can hide the fact. Is that true?
I think what the question makes sense, right? Yeah. Could an MSP go in and hide their mistake? Sure. I have not had an insurance company tell me not to let them do it, but what you're saying makes sense. Could they do it? Yeah. Have I had an insurance company say that they won't let them? No. Could it happen in the future? Sure. It is a weird thing. It's like, do you hire the same locksmith that put in the locks that didn't keep out the thief? It's sometimes yes, sometimes no. The trade-off is that the MSP knows the systems intimately. So, it might boil down to what really caused the breach, right? Was it bad security, or was it a really good threat actor? Was it a completely new hole that nobody knew about? Was it user, if it was a phishing attack, you can't blame the MSP. So that's kind of an ambiguous question, but I see the logic in the question.
Makes sense. I have a carrier who says dual factor authentication is not the same as MFA. Is that true?
So that is one of those interesting questions, because you have to go dig down to what the carrier is using as its definition. So if we're looking at the wording in an insurance contract, in insurance contracts, anything that is most terms are defined in the policy under the definitions section. So I'm not sure if you're referring to a definition within the policy or an underwriter who may not know the difference between MFA and dual factor. And that also is one of those, like, it depends on who's talking to who. To some people, those are the same. To some people, they may not be. So I can't speak to that particular carrier's appetite. I can tell you that I have not run across that.
That makes sense. Well, those are all the questions from the audience today. Chris, tell us, if people have more questions or would like to work with you, where can they reach you?
Sure, thanks. So our website's up here. My email is up here as well. That is my direct office line. And I'll invite everyone on the webinar to fire me off an email, or you can text that number. And I have one or two or both things for you today. I have the top 7 techniques for applying or reapplying or renewing your cyber insurance that you can kind of use as thought provokers for that. Also, for those who are maybe a little more data driven, our carrier partner, one of our carrier partners, Coalition, has an absolutely, if you're into the data and the stats, like a 20-page report on loss trends on their book of business, and who's paying what are paid. It takes that stat page to 22 pages. And I'm happy to share one or both of those with anybody on the webinar today.
Thank you. Well, I want to say thank you to you again, Chris, for joining me today. I really thought this was very valuable, and I want to thank everybody else on the line for spending time with us. And with that, this wraps up our webinar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.